We're going to have Judy Barrett, who is the woman who did the housing study, on the phone. We're going to call her.
Oh, okay.
So if there are questions, most likely coming from, I think, your members about the housing production plan or the housing study per se, she'll be able to answer them.
Who's going to operate that thing? Who's going to dial?
Leslie's going to get that set up.
Okay.
Right?
Are we going to? I'm going to open up the FinCom meeting and enter the public hearing, and then yield to the planning board to do the same, or are we going to simultaneously do that?
No, I think that's the way to do it. And then are you going to let the planning board lead the discussion on Articles 1 and 2, and then you guys ask questions, or how do you see that going?
Sure. I was going to yield to you guys and have Lydia was going to go over the articles for fire station and all the rest of it.
Because I think we'll adjourn after Article 2 is sort of done. Planning board will.
Okay. I thought you were going to maybe you would go over what they even are.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
We will.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll yield to you guys. You describe how you doing.
All right. Are you good then?
Yeah, I'm good. I'll wait. All right. If the yellow team shows up.
Yeah, I know. You should be here. Just looking at this first yellow there's one where what's the matter? 70, 25, 80.
All right. Where's our team?
When I clicked on the link, I just thought those for the finance.
Unbelievable. Linda Williams. She's not here. Barry, right? Yell at her. I guess, what's that?
Are you like the chair of chairman?
Hey, Nat?
I'm the chair of the chair, I guess.
Nat? Okay, because we don't have a...
I know, we don't have a quorum.
Well, we do.
We do.
Want to convene and start with Article 3?
Okay. All right, Dan, ready?
Yeah.
I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting for October 26, 2015. We'll start with public comment. Any items not on the agenda that someone would like to speak about, we could do that now. All right, seeing none, we are going to enter into a public hearing regarding November 9th, 2015 special town meeting warrant articles.
There's somebody right
Oh, there was? I'm sorry. We won't. Go ahead.
I'm Frances Kartunen, and I reside at 67 North Center Street. I'm here today with a petition that was started just 1 week ago, and as of 4 this afternoon, we had 248 signatures on a paper petition, and we had 371 on an online petition, and that's asking for more discussion and clarification about the relocation of our island home. That's a rather large number of people who feel that they haven't been consulted about the relocation, and they're rather concerned about paying for plans to be designed for a particular location which they may not agree with. I don't exactly know how to present this petition to the Planning Board and the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, and I would appreciate being advised on how to do this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would yield to Libby on how you would submit that. I don't know the procurement.
It really doesn't have anything to do with the planning board. This is on your agenda, actually, as one of the warrant articles to which the Finance Committee will be considering a motion, so you might want to take it up then. We're happy to take it at our office at any time down at Town Administration in the town building. Maybe this might be the time to elaborate a tiny bit on the article that pertains to the island home, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
There has been quite a bit of discussion about this. There was a presentation by our architect on October 7th. The presentation is posted on the town website. We're happy to share it with anybody. We're happy to meet with anybody. If people want to let us know their names, we're happy to set up a group meeting. The item that is on the warrant is a revote of $1 million for design that already was voted on at the annual town meeting. Unfortunately, that vote is flawed because of the way the motion was written. The Board of Selectmen has somewhat endorsed the idea of relocating the facility. There are numerous reasons why it cannot be rebuilt in its current or in a state that would make it meet regulatory requirements at the present site. And again, we'd be happy to review that with anybody. But the article that's on the warrant is simply for design. Regardless of whether the facility stays where it is, which I think is not feasible, or moves, we need to have design for a new facility. So I'm sure there is plenty of time for discussion about the actual location. And again, we're happy to convene a group or something like that, or have some forums. But in the meantime, I highly recommend that the design funds go through. And back to the petition, we're happy to take it at our office.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other comments, we are going to go into a public hearing, like I said, regarding the November 9th, 2015 special town meeting warrant articles. And I'd yield. Are we Got a quorum now. Yield to the planning board so they can simultaneously do the same.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I appreciate it. So this is a joint meeting that's going to occur tonight. I'd like to recognize the members of the Nantucket Planning Board for the agenda that's before you at this point, and I'd appreciate a motion to accept the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you. Gentlemen from FinCom, thank you for really showing up tonight and working with us to do this. This is, I can't tell you how much myself, my board appreciate you being here tonight to jointly deal with this. I think this is a rather critical issue before the town, and so I appreciate the combined wisdom that we'll deal with this with tonight. There's essentially two articles that are before the town at the moment. There are planning board concern articles 1 and 2. I'm going to suggest we take those out of order at this point because Article 2 really kind of lays the foundation for what needs to take place in order for Article 1 to work. So without further ado at this point, let me recognize Andrew Vorse, the Director of Planning, to introduce the article for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you did say is important, and I think this is something I've had a discussion with the town moderator on, and basically we need to consider and vote on Article 2 first before we consider the zoning map changes of Article 1. So the reason for that is if we do not pass the workforce housing density bonuses that are contained in Article 2, there's really no reason to make the zoning changes contemplated in Article 1. So I would ask you as the board to vote to make that request to the town moderator that at town meeting we consider Article 2 first and then Article 1.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded from this board to talk to the moderator about doing that. Any further discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it unanimously for that. Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now to the article itself. So Article 2, as you see, this is staff has prepared a draft article which is being projected on the screen behind you. The draft article that is before you on the screen and in your handout contains the actual vote that we're proposing that the board takes. So it's different from the printed article in the warrant, which had general provisions. So the key is that the article is within the scope of the original article, but contains the specifics. So if we could walk through those specifics, the first item adds two definitions, one for workforce home ownership housing and workforce rental housing. As you can see, they're slightly different. The home ownership housing contains a provision for 25% of the units to be restricted at 80% or below, but has an additional requirement that 25% of those could also be limited to occupancy at 175%. The reason for that is that the homeownership housing, we're trying to get to a combination of lower income and middle income housing that are currently priced out of basic market units. The workforce rental housing contains a straight consideration of 25% of the units earning at 80% of median or below. The reason for this in the workforce rental housing, we're tracking the same requirements of Chapter 40B, and that would be that all units in a rental development count towards our subsidized housing or SHI list. You hear that term raised a lot. That's the provision that says we as a town, like all towns in the state, need to get to 10% of our housing units, year-round housing units, not total units, but year-round housing units, to be covered for workers that are in that 80% or below category. Now, under state rules, rental units, even the ones that go for higher, all count towards that SHI calculation. So what that means for us is we want to encourage the rental units, and that is also the result of the housing study, because all of those units count, whereas the owner-occupied units only the ones subject to the restriction count. Is that clear? Okay. The next section, Article 2, would be to insert the workforce rental community as a use, and that's by special permit in the CN district only. The next section would be to issue the ability for the planning board to issue a special permit for the home ownership units. In order to be eligible for this, the property needs to be in an R5 zoning district. Actually, this is the requirement for both. You need a 60,000 square foot minimum. The reason for that is you need a larger lot in order to achieve the efficiencies that we're talking about, to either spread the density throughout or to actually provide the flexibility for the apartment use design. The units would be in perpetuity, so the units would be permanently protected under this special permit. It would be required a major site plan review, which requires traffic study, and there's an extensive section on this, traffic study and drainage, what else am I missing? Landscaping, lighting, all of that is covered in that particular chapter. And there, this also clarifies that if a definitive subdivision is required, again, the planning board has a separate process for dealing with that. So it'll involve two processes: the subdivision, which is a different section, and the special permit. Next section. So section 2 here, actually there's the section above, involves the selectmen, which that the project must be eligible for approval as a local action unit. This is what allows these units to count on the subsidized housing inventory, requires the selectmen to approve these units. And again, that's important, that it involves everybody, planning board, as well as the Board of Selectmen and other regulatory boards. The workforce housing bonus units are identified here. That again, it's a factor of 1.33. So in the minimum 60,000 square foot, where you would be allowed 12 units by right, you could add 4 additional units. There was a map that was included in the handout. As of now, there are 3 sites that meet that particular requirement: the site owned by Richmond, a site owned by Miles Reese at the corner of Surfside Road and Myacomet Ave, and property owned by the town under the control of the Airport Commission. All 3 sites would be eligible for this potential bonus. It is. You could go to that if you want. No. It's the last one. So it's the sites outlined in blue. 2 additional sites show on this map. They're located in Brant Point, and those sites, even though they meet the minimum area, they do not. They have situations, wetlands, and shape issues which preclude them. Under this bylaw, you have to prove that you can create a subdivision meeting all regulations before you're able to get the density bonus. And those sites, again, have limitations that prevent it. Okay. The next group is the rental community. This applies to the CN district. And the commercial neighborhood district now allows apartment buildings, basically 6 units on a 15,000 square foot lot. So basically 24 units would be allowed on the 60,000 square foot property. This allows a bonus of, it would allow 8 additional units, a total of 57 bedrooms on that same property. Again, which is the equivalent of 4 separate apartment buildings. So it's designed to allow those to be grouped, to create usable open space, to create a building design that is not all separated, where the buildings are necessarily sprawled across the entire property. And again, it's designed so that all of these rental units, if they were built, if the developer chose to choose this option, would count towards the town's affordability. There's an additional buffer requirement where the property buffers residentially zoned property not owned by the same person. And I think that's about it on that. So Section 4 clarifies that the parking is the same for all apartment uses, which is 1 parking space per bedroom. So there's no waiver involved, no additional waiver in that. It's the same requirement. Section 5 just clarifies that normally single-family or duplex dwellings are not subject to a major site plan review. This clarifies that if you choose this option, the homeownership housing bonus, you would go through the major site plan review. So those are the technical aspects of it. The reason for pursuing this is that this provides, I think, better local option. If the 40B procedure that's currently, there is a 40B application that has made for site review. There's not an actual application that's been submitted yet. But that permitting path basically is the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then it would continue. The developer has an option to go to the Housing Appeal Committee. Mm-hmm. I know some of you were able to go to the training about that to know what that involves. The Housing Appeal Committee has very limited reviewability. They look at what makes a project uneconomic. They can change the conditions of our local Zoning Board of Appeals. They have a very low standard of adequate. There are examples around the state of 40Bs that you see along the highways. They're the Avalon communities. I think they kind of stand in stark contrast to our expectations here. I think that the local board keeping our rules intact, which would mean the planning board would review new subdivisions, would review modifications to existing subdivisions, would issue or not a special permit, and it also keeps the HDC's review intact as well. I think that would ultimately result in a better project. So.
Okay. Thank you. So let me do this, ladies and gentlemen. I want to open it up to both boards first, ask any questions or comments that they may have. This will be a public hearing as well, too, so we'll recognize you one by one once we've had the board discussion at this point. When you recognize, please come up to the microphone and identify yourself for the record as well, too. So, Linda, go ahead.
Andrew, in Section 1 of Article 2, last sentence of the first paragraph, it says restricted to occupancy by households earning at or below 175. Why is that not 150? The covenant goes up to 150.
This is a proposal that Richmond asked to consider, that there was at least some evidence that the 150 limit was keeping out a segment of population that was either just over the income and that wasn't able, I believe it came out during the lottery procedure for the Sachem's Path, that there were a number of households that were just above this and therefore cut out, yet still couldn't reach the threshold of market. So maybe Mr. Arminetti, he has done a bit of analysis of that, could explain that further.
That's okay. I talked to Hack today about where the people fell that applied for Sachem's Path, and they were oversubscribed at 80 and below and oversubscribed at the 150. Where they were not oversubscribed for people applying was at the 100% of median. So either side of 100%, there weren't that many applicants, or like 3 people for 3 units. Where they got really overtaxed was at the 150 and the 80 and below. So, and I appreciate that, but that takes me back to how do we restrict these? Are these all going to be covenants? Because the 175 cannot be covenanted under the existing legislation.
No, there would have to be a separate. There would have to be the separate
agreement
enforcement mechanism that would be similar to the other mechanisms that would be put on there for
the covenant program. So whatever can be under covenant will be under covenant. And you say these are in perpetuity?
They are.
Which currently the covenant runs in perpetuity. We're going to be tweaking that eventually, but right now that's the way it works. So these aren't going to be a free-for-all, even though there's no 40B involved.
Right.
It's going to fall under the same standards of qualification that the covenant program would require.
That's right. They have a monitoring agent. They have ongoing requirements, and
are they lotteried in this respect? Because it's not a 40B, or it doesn't have to be lotteried? Who qualifies these people? Who gives whoever the house as opposed to somebody else?
I believe under fair housing it's the same
Mr. Arminetti, do you want to?
procedure.
Because 40Bs are all done by lottery.
Sure. Good evening, Chairman Williams, Chairman Rector, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dave Arminetti. I'm Director of Real Estate Development for the Richmond Company and Richmond Great Point Development. Our property is one of the few that is the subject of the potential zoning warrant here, and we've been participating in this process initially through submitting a citizens warrant article that has now evolved into what will hopefully become a more refined and appropriate and effective planning board article. I think that's mainly why we're here tonight. I can speak to the specific questions, and then we'd like to make a few remarks, more general context if we could. We'd be glad to wait till the end. It might be more appropriate at the beginning because it might be able to answer a lot of questions that members of the public might have, but I'll defer to the chairmans and the boards on that. To your question, Mrs. Williams, the proposal, the way we have intended it and the way the staff has shaped it up to now, all of the affordable units, whether they're 80% or 175, would be contractually enforced and obligated through a regulatory agreement. Basically the same legal agreement that's used in the 40B process and essentially similar to the covenant process, but it technically would not be covenant agreement under your 30111 special legislation. It would be outside that, but it would have the same legal force and effect, which town council can confirm, and they can confirm independently with DHCD. That's kind of the magic of this local approved units lit process. They allow you to do that. You don't have to issue a comprehensive permit. You kind of skirt around that, but as long as you have a valid contract between yourself and the developer that's binding, it has the same force and effect and gets all those units on the SHI list. You are subject to the same exact guidelines, and we're proposing that as well as 40B. You have to propose and get approved by the regulatory agency, which in this case would be the town, a affirmative fair housing marketing plan that's very detailed, has all the requirements under state law. You have to meet all the same fair housing requirements under state law. You have to meet all the same income requirements. You have to hire an approved monitor. There's about 24 of them. Our proposal at this moment, and Ann Kuspa is here from Housing Nantucket, would be to retain them as the monitoring agent for our project, a local nonprofit that's qualified by Mass Housing on their approved list that obviously we would hope the community would be comfortable with. And it's all right by the book, just by 40B. So what we're really doing here is proposing a friendly 40B disguised as a zoning warrant article to create the greater local control and to basically take the state out as the middle person.
Is
We're
there
subject
local?
to all the same legal requirements.
But is there, unlike 40B, which you cannot prevent somebody coming from New York or Connecticut or New Jersey that qualifies economically? This would allow all local preference?
Well, in order for the units to count on the subsidized housing inventory list, you can't go above the 70% local preference for those units. But to your point, and why we're continuing to try and refine this in our minds to make a better product and customize it for this community, the units that we're proposing to go to the 175 median income, we're proposing to be 100% local preference. And just to that point, I'll make more of an
Wait a minute, back that up again.
Sure.
The 80 and below.
The 80 and below, in order for the units to count on the subsidized housing inventory, the 80 and below have to be allowed to be purchased by 30% non-preference and only 70% preference. Now, an anecdotal point that will hopefully make the community and the boards even more comfortable is, as many people know, we've already initiated a smaller market rate apartment project on the corner of Gregland Avenue and Nancy Ann Lane, which is 28 units of market rate housing. Studios, 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. The sizes and the type of the units mirror this product that we're hoping to do here in this apartment almost exactly. In about a month of not advertising the project, just Nantucket word of mouth and people walking into our office with Patty and our staff, we've gotten at this point 150 applications without any advertising. Just straight word of mouth in the last couple of weeks. One of them is from off island. And it's a person who used to work at Nantucket Hotel, couldn't keep their job because they couldn't find housing and wants to come back. So I think that's derivative and certainly indicative of the kind of demand we're going to get. We feel very strongly that we're not going to get people, no offense to anybody on the mainland, we're not going to get people coming here from Lawrence and Providence and New Bedford and Boston to move to Nantucket. The vast, vast majority, if not the entirety of our demand is going to come from on the island already.
Now, the 80% to 175%, we can do all local preference?
You do 100% local preference because those units will not go on the SHI, but they'll be locally affordable. So you have even more control over those. And we would propose 100% local preference because we think it's appropriate.
Well, just to put everybody else's mind at ease, Sachem's is all local so far. Yep. Abrams Quarry was all local. The housing authority that I'm on the 30-some-odd years we've been in existence, we have one family from out of state. So it generally works out pretty well that the people that know about it, that apply for it, even though you have to advertise Central Register or wherever you have to go off island, it's been almost 100% locals that have availed themselves of these units.
Yeah, and that's going to happen. And in the case where we have more discretion, like the 175, we will make the rules 100%, so we know we're going to get 100%. Mm-hmm. That's part of the magic, if you will, of this whole process.
Okay.
Mr. Armitage, both Mr. Williams and I agree. Was there anything else you wanted to expound upon while you're here at the moment?
Well, if I could, I don't want to take up too much time, but
briefly,
given that we are one of the primary participants here, we might want to make a few remarks just to give a little context so people better understand where we're coming from and the questions that we've been getting over the last couple of weeks since we essentially initiated this process. First and foremost, the issue we're dealing with here, housing, affordable housing, and the impacts of development is, incredibly important to the island. It's also oftentimes very complex and very difficult. There's no question about that. We all deal with that on these boards, our members of the community, and our company every day. But the decision we're going to make today is a very simple one. Do we want more local control, or do we not want local control? Mm-hmm. That first step, the decision is very simple in our minds. For all the town boards, for our abutters, for the members of the community at large, and for us as the developer. How we implement that and how we go forward with all the details of that is going to be difficult and complicated. But the next step that we're talking about tonight, we think is a very simple one, and there's only one answer. And the answer is to embrace the more cooperative, consensus-based local control approach as opposed to a 40B process. We don't think there's any question about that. And we want to roll up our sleeves after that. That's why we've offered this process and proposed it, work with the town, work with our neighbors, and come up with a project that we can all be proud of. Many people have asked us, myself and Patty, why did you guys propose this? And I think even in the paper last week, Mrs. Stanton mentioned kind of a reluctance to believe developers who are offering something that looks too good to be true. And I would say that cynicism is probably well-deserved most of the time. But in this case, we offered it, and our motives are clear, and they're fairly simple. One, we would get certainty from this process, as opposed to the 40B, which would be a little less certain. We would also get some expediency. Even if a 40B goes well, it generally tends to take 18 months to 2 years. This process, if we can reach a consensus and move somewhat expeditiously, could probably take a year or less. So if you're a real estate developer, as your own consultant said at last week's seminar on the 40B, the biggest things you can have are certainty and time. So we're certainly getting something out of this. We're not trying to hide that. We're saying right up front, we're not doing this only because we're good people, but we're doing it partly because we're good people, but we're going to get something out of this. But what we're giving up is a whole bunch of control, eliminating all the waivers that we would get under 40B, and subjecting ourselves to the full review of town meeting, all the boards, and all the agencies locally, and we think that's the most appropriate approach and the best way to go about this. It really will create a better product at the end, and we think it's really the only way to go. Luckily, we have this vehicle available to us at town meeting and the ability to move forward on this, so we're optimistic that this will work out and it will be the best approach. The other reason is we heard loud and clear at last April's town meeting the community wants more affordability and guaranteed affordability. We weren't able to deliver that last spring in the market rate housing proposal that we proposed, and we heard loud and clear the community wants affordability and guaranteed affordability, and this would provide this. What else has happened in the last 6-7 months, I think, is a light has gone on across the island. The crisis we have here in housing has truly risen to a level of crisis. And if we don't do something that has some scale and some magnitude that will really get at the problem, it's really going to be a bigger problem in the future, and it's going to start to overwhelm things more and more, whether that be seasonal or year-round. And we want to be part of the solution. We know our project's not going to be perfect. We know it's not going to be a panacea. But we have the most appropriate land to take a big chunk out of this housing problem on the island and do it the right way. And that's what we're committed to doing. So I'm glad to answer specific questions about the income, the economics. In addition to Patty, who is here, we brought our fiscal impact consultant, John Connery from Connery & Associates, who has a great deal of experience throughout the Commonwealth over the last 40 years in that capacity, working for both municipalities and private parties. He will do our detailed fiscal impact study and submit it to the town for review. We want to take a little different approach this time, if I could digress for one quick second with the Finance Committee. What we're hoping to do this time is to provide John as a resource, primarily to start tonight in terms of listening, but we'd like to start kind of a committee process with a couple of members of the FinCom and a couple of members of the community who have a particular expertise or interest in finance and statistics and economics, and essentially set the scope of work for John's work before he even embarks on it, then come back with that study, have it vetted out by the FinCom, and then presented to all the boards who would make that decision before the special permit. And we think that's a more proactive, productive approach, and we'd like to offer that starting tonight. And John is here to answer questions if they come up about specifics. Otherwise, we're very interested to hear what everybody has to say tonight. And we also appreciate the audience and our neighbors coming out. We know this is a little bit of a compressed time period with the town meeting coming up so soon, and we do value and appreciate that. So thank you.
Great. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave, while you're at the microphone, sorry. One thing I think that's important, and this is a discussion we have had with Richmond, is that in the event that Article 1 passes and then Article 2, which rezones the property, we need a commitment from Richmond that you're going to actually follow through and develop the affordable units, not say, oh, thanks, you downzoned my or upzoned my property, and now we're not going to use the affordable provisions. That would take the form of some sort of development agreement. I've been given a draft example, not of this specific project, but that's been provided by town council in another situation. And I just want to be sure for the record that that's something that there's a commitment to.
Sure. Let me reiterate that for the record, Mr. Chairman. We understand the need and the value for that. A handshake is good, but a contract is better. So we're more than willing to enter into that type of agreement with the town. We've done it in many other jurisdictions that we've worked with. It's certainly the most effective way to do this, and it can be done quite effectively with a brief agreement. What we would most likely do is enter into kind kind of a binding letter agreement before a town meeting that would say, if things pass at town meeting, this development agreement will be executed and entered into. But we are fully making that commitment on the record, and we'll have something in writing that's binding to submit to the town before town meeting that town council will presumably be very satisfied with. So thank you for pointing that out.
And one follow-up while we're talking about a letter agreement, development agreement. One thing that I think is important for the future, for the town to at least achieve, ultimately, we need to work towards getting to the 10%. So we need to not say we'll never get there. We need to say that we will get there, and here's our path to get there. That's what the Housing Production Plan is for. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund has now funded that effort, and a consultant is now on board to get that done. One of the thresholds to reach what's called a safe harbor is the production of the Housing Production Plan and the production of either 0.5% or 1% of our needed units. That's 24 or 49 units. So 24 units gets us 1 year of safe harbor, 49 units gets us 2. So one thing that I think that of all of the development that's before us, this particular one has an opportunity to deliver at least the 2%. So phasing is important here. And I think what we would, again, look for some commitment to is to help the town in that phasing so that all of the units are not maybe approved at the same time, but they are phased out. And with that could be phased out infrastructure or other things. It's also an opportunity, I think, to evaluate, what is being done and how the project is going, what the response is. So the phasing is kind of critical, I think, a critical benefit for the town to reach that safe harbor provision for at least a period of 2+ years. So I'm hoping there's at least a commitment on Richmond's part for that.
There is, and let me reiterate that for the record, and I think we can wrap that into the same type letter agreement and development agreement. And again, this points out one of the real benefits of this cooperative process in lieu of the 40B process. We can make these kind of commitments, and we can work together with the town to be an ally where our interests are very well aligned, as opposed to through the 40B process, we wouldn't have this discretion and the luxury of doing this. And what Mr. Vorse also points out is a point that Patty's really been advocating on our side that's important, which is by this phasing, not only do we help the town in your subsidized housing inventory list and your land use planning and preventing maybe less appropriate projects from coming forward, we can gauge how our project's being implemented in terms of all the impacts. It's not all going to come online at once in terms of infrastructure, demands on sewer, demands on water, traffic impacts. And what that will allow is the planning board and the building department to ratchet things down if, say, despite all of our representations and guarantees and the improvements we make, the traffic after the first 50 units is worse than we thought. Then the planning board can say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't working out the way we thought. Before we give you the next chunk of 50 units, you got to fix it right. And that's another thing that would not be available under 40B. So not to sound like a broken record, but the benefits here, I think, are adding up to a point where the decision is a very simple one. This is the right way to go.
There's 2 boards here, so let me kind of defer back and forth. I'll give everyone a turn first. Did you have anyone on your end who wanted to?
Anybody entertaining questions? David?
Yeah, if I can address this to Dave. So, and I guess following up from what Andrew said, so just to be very clear, there will be an agreement that will have legal enforcement binding you to the terms that are set forth here, such that if there's an approval at the special town meeting of this rezoning and all of then activities that you say have to take place, for which there might be a month or 2 months or 3 months that goes by, that you will be legally bound to follow through on those, and that there would be some stipulation of penalty or whatever the case may be legally, so that there is assurance that we will get the follow through on your commitments, of which the town meeting is going to rely.
And you're speaking mainly to the affordability component?
Yes.
Absolutely. In fact, I would suggest and be willing to offer that the way it's phrased is that no special permit would be approved unless it has the affordability that meets the letter of the law, so that the planning board would have every legal right to say, sorry, the plan you have in front of us for your special permit doesn't add up. It doesn't have the affordability that was adopted by town meeting. You can't go past go.
So, and I question over to the planning board. So a special permit would govern all set of circumstances on that rezoned property? So there could, unless a special permit is issued, nothing could be done with that property once it's rezoned. Is that?
Yeah.
But what if they don't make good on the agreement? Do they then have an upzoned piece of property that they could do something else with that would not require a special permit?
No, the contract that we would enter into would preclude that, and it would be binding on us and enforceable by the town.
Right.
And what kind of enforcement mechanism is contemplated, Andrew?
Well, the mechanism would be that they would have to, there would be nothing else allowed except for that unit, for that type of development, so they would be precluded from seeking any other permit. So,
But could they do something else with the property?
they would have to come back and basically renegotiate that easement. Renegotiate the agreement, because they would be locked into it once they signed it. It's binding.
Yeah. I think the bottom line is the town would have us over a barrel, which is probably a good place to be if we didn't step forward and fulfill our obligations.
And just for clarity, the Board of Selectmen signs the agreement. The Board of Selectmen and Richmond would be the signatories for that agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, hang on. Just one at a time. Go ahead.
John? Let me understand the safe harbor. As I understand it, it requires 1% of the 1% of the 10% each year, and so if we okay a project and we're able to, the critical areas, we are able to organize it in a way that it comes at us a year's worth and then a year's worth, that we've got at least 2 years of safe harbor, which, as I understand it, means that no other 40B units can be approved during that period of time.
It's not that they can't be approved. There could be a 40B, for example, proposed by the Housing Authority that everybody supports, but it takes away the zoning board can also say, this particular 40B that you brought us is unacceptable. We're not going to consider it. And there's no appeal to the Housing Appeal Committee during that time.
So the state loses its enforcement for 40B during that period of time.
During those safe harbor periods, yes.
So if in an ideal world, if we were able to do it 1 year at a time for 10 years, we would take 40B out of the equation.
Right, as long as we're producing at that particular level.
Yeah.
Either the 49 units or the 24. The only thing that would change that is the next decennial census, which the decennial census is what sets that amount.
When is that going to occur?
2020.
Pardon?
2020.
Okay. So for at least 5 years.
At least 5 years, we're working with that number.
With that number.
49.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, so Linda.
Any part of that agreement, if you were operating under a 40B, DHCD involved, or any of the other guys up there involved, if you were to build the first 50, 25% of the first 50 has to be 80 or below. I'm not hearing that here. You could always decide without any specificity to this agreement on that point. You could decide to build the 50 market rates which you can't do under 40B. So I would be looking for something in the agreement that said if you build for every whatever, you have to build 25% of those have to be affordable. So you're not building all the market rates and we decide the traffic is unbearable, which is going to be an issue of great discussion at the planning board when this does come in, that the percentage remains all the way through the phasing. It has to.
Absolutely. Let me confirm for the record that that would be our intention. We can embed that explicitly in this development agreement if the boards deem it appropriate. Our intention, and maybe it's my fault for not articulating this already, would be that the design of our project, even though it's not proceeding presumably under 40B, if we make this decision, we would still subject ourselves to that aspect of the 40B requirement as well, which is all the units have to be spread equally throughout the entire development, number one. Number two, they have to be indistinguishable from all the market rate units, both from the exterior and the interior in terms of the finishes. So you can't do vinyl appliances and cheap wall-to-wall carpet for the affordables, and then stainless appliances and nice wood floors for the markets. So we're committed to that. And then lastly, to your point, the units have to come online at the same time proportionately. And the way we've done it in many communities, the last 40B project that Richmond did was in the town of Wakefield that got fully stabilized about 2 years ago. The town, in their permit, embedded a requirement that said for every 3 certificates of occupancy that were issued for market rate units, 1 certificate of occupancy had to be issued for an affordable unit. So that guarantees that performance, and that would be easily documented in this agreement and then in the special permit, or the regulatory agreement and the special permit. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Patty.
Not to get, Patty Roggebean with Richmond Great Point Development. Not to get into the traffic question, but I just wanted to reemphasize how well the phasing works with that particular issue, not just with respect to traffic on Old South Road, but I know from our discussions with neighbors, access roads in the development, so that nothing would happen overnight. All of these things would be considered in a plan process incrementally with the capacity to actually look at the impact as we move forward. So I just wanted to make that point.
Great, thank you. Is there anything else that you've got from your board? No? Anything else from my board members? Or Andrew, Leslie? All right, so if you're in concurrence, I suggest we open the public hearing at this point for individuals to comment on this. Is that?
Sure, we're going to open up public hearing, so you want to open your public.
Yeah, no problem. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to declare at this point the planning board will open its public hearing on article number 2. If you please make sure you raise your hand, identify yourself for the record when you come up. I appreciate the fact that a lot of you have taken the time and energy to show up tonight at a rather late hour. We ask, please, that you do one thing, is that if you are in agreement with something with the previous speaker, you don't necessarily have to reiterate it. Just say, I'm in complete agreement. That will help probably speed things up a little bit as well, too. So thank you for your indulgence.
Yeah, I'd open the meeting to anybody who has any comments on, that's right now, Article 1 or 2.
Article 2. Yeah.
Article 2.
Article 2, yeah. Gentlemen, way up and back. I'm going to grab him first, yeah. I'm going to have you come down to the microphone since this is televised for people.
I have a handout, but the Article 2 in here is different from the one that's being discussed, so I can't comment.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Did you?
The article, the updated article is on the screen. Everything in yellow is different. And the other difference, the article that's in the packet is the article that was part of the warrant. And that is going to change, as we discussed, with the specifics provided in this motion.
Okay.
So this is the article that's on the screen that we passed out earlier is the article to comment on.
Yep.
Can you also clarify that when we go to the regular town meetings, the warrant comes out without the recommendations of the FinCom or the Planning Board? So through the hearing process in January, February, March, before you actually get to the annual town meeting, warrant articles are morphed by different bodies. And so when you do get to town meeting, you get the final warrant, you will see a whole nother section. Sometimes it's highlighted, sometimes it's a complete rewrite. But this is standard procedure, not just with these articles. We just have a little bit more of a compressed time. But this is normal procedure to have things morph. Once they've come out in January, February, in the warrant, they change before they get to town meeting.
We haven't really even talked about one yet. So go ahead, please. That'll be coming up next time.
How you doing? My name is Tom Hanlon. I live at 20 Daffodil Lane, and I'm going to read a short statement from the Daffodil Lane Homeowners Association. I've just been picked to be the spokesman, so don't kill the messenger. Understandably, many of us are concerned with Articles 1 and 2 to be voted on a special town meeting 2 weeks from tonight. We feel the same way now we did about Article 3 was put into the town meeting in April. We were against opening our roads to any new or abutting subdivision, citing safety concerns as well as impact on our private infrastructure. As property owners in Cedar Crest 3, we object to Richmond Property Great Point Development presumption that they have the right to use lots in our development as access roads to the new and entirely separate developments. Furthermore, we consider that Richmond Great Point Properties has no such right to such use of lots as roads would be contrary to the provisions of the Declaration of Trust of the Cedar Crest 3 Homeowners Association. At the Planning Board hearing on February 9th, Richmond Great Point Development acknowledged that the residents of Cedar Crest 3 had a strong vested interest in their neighbourhood, and they indicated at the time that they wanted our comfort level to be at the highest with regards to what they were doing. Richmond Great Point Development also indicated that the increase in zoning via Article 53 would not link our neighbourhood with the new neighbourhood or subdivision. They acknowledged that there would be no access between the two. They opted to end discussion on all access through Evergreen and Daffodil, acknowledging that dangers of possible increased traffic in our neighbourhood, especially given the proximity of it to the airport. We are looking for clarification on whether this zoning article is ultimately seeking to connect our current neighbourhood and the newly proposed one. Respectfully, if the zoning article is looking in essence to quadruple density, can't we find a compromise like we did prior to April's town meeting? We need to take the using of our private roads off the table. If you are so inclined to support these articles, we request the following additions and changes to be made to Article 2 as follows. Under the Workforce Housing Bonus Lots 2 of Article 2, we are asking that the following be added. A minimum buffer area of at least 20 feet shall be established between the workforce housing bonus lots and residentially zoned abutting properties or subdivision roadways. The Planning Board may require the buffer area to include plantings, fencing, walls or other improvements to mitigate impacts to abutting properties. Access to any of these workforce housing bonus lots shall either be off public roadway or a new subdivision roadway unconnected to a private approved acquired subdivision roadway. And under Workforce Rental Community 3 of Article 2, we ask that the following be added. Access to any of the workforce rental community lots shall either be off public way or new subdivision roadway unconnected to a private approval required subdivision roadway. Thank you for your time and appreciate the board taking into consideration our thoughts and concerns.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this? Mr. Atherton. Mr. Atherton, just out of curiosity, I noticed that, was there a scheduled meeting for the Board of Selectmen tonight?
No.
For this? All right, because I noticed there's 4 of you in the room.
I'm not speaking for the board.
Oh.
I am a member of the board.
Yeah, I know.
But I really have a question, but go ahead. Erica?
That's okay.
We were very clear with the Board of Selectmen tonight that they would not be doing any deliberations. They're not sitting next to each other. It is not considered a public body at this moment. They are individuals sitting at this meeting.
Okay.
Chairmen and other members of the committees, I just would like to follow up a little bit on Linda Williams' comment about the time frame for an annual town meeting, which is significantly longer, I think we all know that, than the 2 weeks we're facing now, to deal with an article many people are seeing for the first time. So there is a meeting, we're going to have to deal with that. I noticed there's a meeting of the Finance Committee set for tomorrow. Whether you're going to meet or not, I don't know. And I'm curious whether or not the Planning Board anticipates meeting again, and perhaps how many times before town meeting, because people may need some time to digest what's on the screen and would like to comment further to you. So I'm just asking both of you about what you expect the process is going to be before you make definitive recommendations, primarily on Articles 1 and 2 for the special town meeting. Thank you.
If we don't give motions tonight, that's what the meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. So we have at least one day, I guess, to make a decision.
No, we're not. I don't think there's enough regulatory time under which to have another meeting, Mr. Voris.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you could continue the meeting to another time if you wanted to. I know that, again, there's a tight time schedule with the special town meeting, and we've been given a schedule from, I believe you, through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe to the town manager that she needs final, in order to get this printed and to get the final motion out, that needs to happen.
By Erica.
Sorry, Erica Mooney. The Board of Selectmen is scheduled to adopt the final warrant with the FinCom and Planning Board recommendations this Wednesday night, and it has to go to the printer on Thursday.
Okay.
And then we have to have it to the mailing place, I think, no later than Monday for it to meet its required timing to go out to the mail to the residents. Voters.
Yep, thank you. So we can continue the meeting, but it sounds like Wednesday at your meeting at 6 o'clock is the drop dead deadline. Is that correct? Okay, there we go. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Mr. Atherton? Seems like it will become inherent upon your board to be the final adopting.
Well, that's okay. But here you're going to meet again or continue. You'll decide to continue, I guess, at some point tonight.
We can potentially continue the meeting, but that'll be at the discretion of the board based upon what we hear for public testimony tonight as well.
Well, we can't because we can't post it. We'd have to maybe Thursday sometime earliest. We don't have a posting for Wednesday.
You don't have to post it as long as you continue your public meeting to a date certain.
Right, and I believe that's what I heard from staff, and I see town council shaking his head, saying yes. Thank you, nodding. Yes, I'm sorry. It's been a long day. I apologize. Thank you. All right, there you have it.
Hello, my name is Tom Carty, and I live at 3 Bluebird Lane in Noship, across the street. I do have a couple of questions. I hope they're appropriate for this meeting. The first thing I wanted to find out was if this proposal is met as stipulated, how much of the 10% requirement the state requires is fulfilled?
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, if Richmond proceeds with the same number of units that are in the 40B, that would be 150 apartments. So that would add 150 to our currently we have about 124, I believe, on the shy list, which is 2.5%. So that would double that eventually, and then there would be 8 units in the ownership category. So our total that we have to reach is 490. So we're a lot of math on the fly, Finance Committee, buddy. So it would bring us up.
You're a couple hundred short.
Still a couple hundred short.
Okay. I have another question, and I have a few questions. One regards the I think it was, is it 20 or 40 bedrooms per 1,250 square feet in the high-density affordable rental units. And I think there was 20 such units being proposed. Is that correct?
Mr. Arminetti, I'll yield to you at this point.
The reason I bring that up, I find that sort of overwhelming, personally. I'll tell you why. I mean, as an example, I've lived in a number of large cities from London to the U.S., and when I've seen large concentrations of low income, I see that there's a preponderance, if relative to the rest of the community, of problems in the sense of upkeep, problems in the sense of problems within the community. I've seen that type of thing occur a number of times, and I worry about that denseness. Living in Nashup, the average unit is about, land is about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet, let's say. And what that says is that you're putting about 150 to 200 people within one of those lots. That is a tremendous amount of, maybe I've got something wrong, but if you clarify for me, I'd appreciate it. But that's the way it read to me. I've also lived on Swain Street and had a home there for, my mother-in-law's home, for 35, 40 years, and lived next to the housing units that were there, dormitory-style units from the Brand Point properties, of which there was a lot of noise problems. There were, and we felt it heavily when children couldn't go to sleep, party problems on the weekends, with not anywhere close to the density that we're talking about here. So I worry about that aspect. I realize I'm not against the low-income housing. I'm for that. I think that's, the town needs to meet that. But I think it behooves us and is required that the town boards address these type of questions and look at how to resolve them, or how to place buffer zones there to protect against some of this. I have a concern about, I know there's a number of homeowners associations in this area. Nashup has one. I think the other community here that's being impacted has one. I worry about who owns these units, and I'm not talking about the units that are going to be $650,000 to $800,000. I'm talking about the rental units and the workplace units. And are the workplace units going to be units where people are going to live there year-round, take care of them year-round? And how's that going to be enforced? Or are they going to go back to the islands, where many of them come from, or other parts of the country, and they'll be empty and nobody's watching them? So I have concerns, and I hope that this is the appropriate place to bring those up. Thank you.
Thank you for noting that, but I'm a little concerned about, we're starting to cross over into a little dangerous territory where we start mentioning density, problems associated, and low income. Okay? I'm just saying, there's just, having sat on this board through a number of different things, I hear you, but I also have to raise some aspersions and social concerns here.
I fully understand
when I hear
what you're
that.
saying.
Now, one thing I will say to you as one member of this planning board is that since this is a special permit, if this does pass through as a special permit under local control, one of the things is, as a planning board, we can also reopen public hearings as well.
And that's why I brought up, how is it going to be managed? Because that's the point I'm trying to drive towards.
And I think I'll yield, if you don't mind, board members, let me yield to Mr. Arminetti. I think he's already spoken once about the management aspect, but let me.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, the management, let me address the rental side first and oversight. Our intentions would be to continue the ownership of the entirety of the apartment component, which is proposed at a maximum of 225 units, which is actually, I think, probably 50 or 60 units less than the density in this zoning proposal would allow. This is more general to provide a density that might be appropriate at other locations. But we're actually not going to propose to exercise the entirety of the density that would be allowed under this. But for the apartments, we would continue ownership under one Richmond entity. It would be professionally managed by our company. In this case, given that it's Nantucket and it's local, we probably would be very unlikely to hire kind of a regional property manager like a Dolben Company or a Peabody Properties. We would hire our own on-island staff that would be here most likely would live on site. Certainly the maintenance people in all of our apartment projects live on site 24/7, so they can be more responsive. And we would manage it in what's essentially called in the marketplace, an institutional quality environment. The home ownership group, in addition to all the conditions and covenants that we would have with the town through the planning board and through the regulatory agreement, our single-family neighborhood will certainly have a homeowners association and binding covenants similar to what many of you live in your existing neighborhoods. And that would continue to be enforced by a board of directors similar to almost all the homeowners associations on the island. Just quickly to the bedroom point, if I could, Mr. Chairman. That first draft that we submitted was a little awkward in terms of how it articulated the bedroom mix. Mainly it's a derivation of the fact that the definition in the code is a little tricky, and it makes you kind of residually back into the units from the bedrooms. And I know the staff has intended to clean that up for some time now and is continuing to proceed with that. And they've essentially done that even more simply in this proposed warrant article in the revision, which is they've put an absolute cap on the number of bedrooms per lot. That's actually an absolute hard cap, again, that we would not be able to implement through a 40B process, but we can through this local control process. So the numbers, unfortunately, sir, that you mentioned, the 875 square foot per lot and the 40 bedrooms, the math of that actually doesn't work the way maybe most people read it. But the bottom line is, in the current draft, there's an absolute limit of 57 bedrooms for every acre and a half, which is medium density relative to apartments. And again, if we went the 40B route, there would be no control over that by the town. We could put in as many bedrooms as we wanted, and as many as the market could accommodate. So again, this is local control, more restrictive, a route that we think is more appropriate in this case.
Mr. Chairman. I just think it's important, too, that if we were to compare Noshop density, so in the same 60,000 square foot lot, essentially there would be roughly 12 lots, 12 homes. And if those homes had somewhere between 3 and 4 bedrooms, that's somewhere 36 to 48 bedrooms. So what we're talking about here is a net increase of nine bedrooms more if it were if we were comparing 4-bedroom homes, 15 if it were all 3 bedrooms. So I think that the bedroom density is kind of similar because the need, I think, that we're trying to get to is the smaller dwelling units. So under the 40B regulations, at least 10% have to be 3 bedrooms. That's why that allowance is here. But anyway, just in terms of density.
I just did the math, kind of,
Sure.
20 bedrooms for 1,250 square feet. It would be very, very high.
Yeah,
and I looked at that.
You're just Patty Rockabeen, Richmond Great Point. One of the things that we're trying to do in terms of managing this project, obviously the phasing is going to be positive, but there will be a homeowner association for the market rate homes and the single-family homes. We will also manage on-site the apartments. And again, the affordability, keep in mind, is 25%. Not to say that that's directly correlated with any kind of issues that you might or may not want in that. We're also trying within that context, and we will continue to share this as we phase in the program, we want to make sure that we manage some of the abuses that we already see and that you're aware of as well with some of these kinds of properties. Basements, we're building on slab, for instance, and it's purposeful because we're going to try to avoid basement apartment issues. We are trying very hard to make sure that we as a management organization have a real handle on what's going on in our neighborhood, basically. So I think that, again, we're taking all these things into account already. We're trying to make this effort happen. I just want to remind the group, the 40B process does not essentially make us do any of this, and yet we're coming to you in good faith and saying this is what we'd like to do. And the reason is because we would like you as a community to embrace our neighborhood like you embrace the Cedar Crest neighborhood and the Noshop neighborhood. We don't want to be, the black sheep out there as far as, how people regard us. So it's as Dave talked before, there is a two-way street here. It's not just about efficiencies. It has a lot to do with what we'd like to present to the island and how we'd like to be seen as far as the neighborhood is concerned. And, I've had the opportunity in the last few weeks, as noted, to deal with and talk to a lot of people coming in the door looking desperate for these, for homes, and I'm not saying affordable, just anything. Rental housing is meant for folks that can't afford a single-family home. So at some level, it's affordable, and that's probably why the state allows you to count them all. We are in a place, in my opinion, just beyond the studies that have been done, we are in a place as a community that's in real crisis. I don't think we can go through another season without more product. And what we're trying to do, in a real sense, is put some more product on the market before your landscapers have no place to go, right? Because I'm getting calls from business people too, and Tom knows this as well, saying, my manager that I've had for 5 years or 10 years has no place to live, and I'm going to lose them. Can you help us? And that's the kind of thing. I've got 150 applications, all with local addresses, and everybody has a job. And that's without advertising. Thanks.
Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this?
Thank you, Chairman Rector. Tobias Glynn, member of the Board of Selectmen. I have 2 questions and 1 observation. One is that under this proposal, it'll have 175% of median income. I don't believe that would count towards the shy list. I just think that's important to note. And my 2 questions are, under the 40B legislation, the developer has an obligation to maintain a limited dividend on profitability. And I'd like to know how that's going to be addressed through this article. And my second question is, what is to stop a developer or any other developer in the future on any of these zoning locations from pursuing a 40B if they do not agree to the special permit conditions set forth by the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board? What's to prevent them from pursuing a 40B if they find those terms more agreeable to them and they can use that as leverage?
Andrew, can I yield to you and the second one might be the easier of the two.
Yeah, let me answer the second one first. So what prevents any 40B is what would prevent. So it doesn't matter because a 40B basically ignores zoning. So until we, A, produce our 10% of the units, or B, reach a safe harbor provision. So safe harbor provision I think we've talked about, which is creating a certain number, having the housing production plan, and creating the units. So the units have to be created, and if they're created in a regular schedule, that will extend out the safe harbor. So there is no way, and there's, as you know, we have another 40B proposed in a different location. 40Bs can be proposed in any location until we reach the 10% or until we have safe harbor provisions. They can be proposed anywhere and proposed to override zoning in any district. So the first question, I'm trying to remember.
Could you just repeat that, Mr.
Oh,
Britt?
the limited dividend.
Thank you.
Yep. So there is no concern about limited dividend with this approach or with a 40R approach. So that does not factor into the consideration because there's other strict requirements that come with the 40B, which talk about the project community imposing conditions that make the project uneconomic. The result of that is that we are able to have, I think, broader negotiations with the developer to seek more investment. We're highly limited in a 40B proposal. We don't have that latitude because it is all under the standard of making the project uneconomic. So if planning, in that case, in a 40B, if the zoning board says we'd really like a sidewalk completely off the site to, help with safety, number one, you're not allowed to make investments off the site. Those can be overturned. And number two, if it makes the project uneconomic by adding to the cost of that unit beyond a certain percentage, it can be stricken out by the HAC.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Briefly, Mr. Armitage, briefly.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of brief points to Mr. Glidden's point, or questions, which were good questions. Andrew's point about the limited dividend requirement, it is not required under a non-40B approach, but it's public information in the site approval application package that we submitted relative to the 40B that our return, if that project goes well, is going to be somewhere in the low to mid 6% return. And I could see some of the Finance Committee board members probably roll their eyes and say, that's not very profitable, which is true. We're in a very high-cost environment here, and we acknowledge that. And to Mr. Vorse's point, I think we can expect that we're going to have to fund more mitigation in the consensus-based approach than we would have under the 40B approach. So if anything, I think our return is probably going to go down a little by the end of this process, not up a little. And I could probably guarantee you with absolute certainty, unless the market rate rents triple, which I don't see happening, notwithstanding the housing pressures here, we're not going to get anywhere near close to the 10% return on equity that the limited dividend would start to kick in. So I think we don't have to have any concern about that. The 175% of AMI that we're proposing just for a small sliver of the affordability, just a couple of brief important points. Those few units, which in this case would be 7, would not count on the SHI, but they would provide what we think is a very important slice of affordability to a slightly higher income component of the community. And let me just explain that. The 150% AMI that the Nantucket Covenant Program and that a portion of the Sacham's Path project responded to, those incomes, the limits this year for those potential buyers to qualify is about $140,000 a year. Total gross income for a 4-income family. Our 175% of AMI proposal would take that up to about $165,000. So not a huge leap, but a leap, as Mr. Vorse pointed out, that we saw at the Sacham's Path project. People are just over that 141, 142 income level, and they can't even get in the lottery. So we're just talking about peeling out 7 affordable units, making them locally more customized to that income segment that we see. And maybe a greater point, back in April, when we were talking about some portion of affordability under the meeting article 453, we talked about our homes being sold in the $700,000 and $750,000 range, and people responded by saying, you may call that economically accessible, but it's not affordable. What about the Covenant House? It's even more expensive than the Covenant House, which this year is $675,000 roughly. Even under our 175% AMI proposal, and I think this is significant, the formula that we're going to use under the mass housing guidelines as opposed to the covenant guidelines, we would allow you to qualify for that house if you have an income up to $165,000, but we're going to sell that house for only $590,000. So we're going to sell even our least affordable homes in that development that we've proposed for $85,000 less than the covenant house, and we think that's pretty significant.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak on this? Hi.
Just briefly, my name is Patty Nichols, and I'm a resident in the Evergreen Daffodil Road area, and I just wanted to thank Tom for speaking and to acknowledge that I support his points that he made.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Melanie Sabin, also 21 Evergreen Way. I also support Tom Hanlon's comment. I also did want to say that I think we have, like Dave Arminetti said, it's a simple, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous this speaking.
That's fine.
But we have 2 options in front of us right now because those are the 2 options that we've been given. So we had another option in the spring, but that got voted down, and this is kind of what we've been put in front of us to make a decision. So it sounds to us that it's in the favor of putting it in the town's hands to do what we think, or hopefully what you think and we think is the best thing for the neighborhood, for the surrounding areas, for the town. We all know that there's a housing need. We just want to see it done correctly. And one question to Richmond Great Point is, this obviously sounds like it's going to take a long time. It's years and years of development, and with a tighter profit margin, is that a sufficient profit margin to keep you going and happy doing this? And what happens if we change this zoning and you decide that you don't want to do this anymore, that the profit margin isn't there, and we've created these 5,000 square foot lots? So I guess that's my question, is there something in there that this development will stay the course?
Andrew, I'm going to turn to you with this, if you don't mind.
Well, I do think that as part of the development agreement, I mean, remember, we can always change zoning back. If we change it once and the legally binding development agreement isn't followed, we do have an option of changing the zoning back. And I think that's something that we would address in the development agreement. Mr. Chairman, one point that I just want to make clear is that it's clear that either proposal, and this is really an article about a permitting path here, is that the Cedar Crest 1 and Cedar Crest 3 subdivisions will have to be modified at some point. We've gotten a lot of correspondence about that, and it needs to be understood that any subdivision can be modified. Okay, you're not frozen. Once a subdivision comes in, it's not. The law provides that it may be modified. So it would have that process would have to be done one way or the other. So under this proposal, the planning board has to have a public hearing about what that subdivision modification is. And that decision can be appealed to the courts, and it's one of at least 3 decisions that the board would make that's subject to separate appeal. So in addition, there's the modification of the existing subdivision, the approval of the new subdivision, and the special permit itself. In the case of a 40B, the ZBA handles all 3 of those questions together, but they would have the same responsibility of modifying the planning board subdivision of the past. So, and again, that decision, should the ZBA not do that, there's at least 2 cases which say, from the HAC, that says that they can do that, and they're supposed to. So I just want that to be clear, is that the issue of the road, the issue of the site plan that's been submitted is not over. That site plan, we have raised issues with Richmond, so you're not voting on that site plan. That site plan is not finalized yet. And the road issue is not finalized yet either. So I think we've gotten a lot of correspondence about the road issue. Certainly that design that is a straightaway extending that road is certainly not something that we would advocate. We do have to see their traffic numbers. We do have to make sure that there's some interconnection, whether it's pedestrian and bicycle, but there needs to be, we want, as I think Patty mentioned, that we want neighbors to actually visit with each other and not have, a wall in between, but there should be some, you might actually have friends there. You might have first-time home buyers that you're friends with, that you want to be able to get to that neighborhood and not drive all the way around Old South Road to go to a kid's birthday party or something. So it's something that would come up during our permitting process, but that's the permitting that has to happen in order for that to be addressed.
No, thank you, Andrew, for bringing that up, because I think that was an important point, because I heard very clearly tonight from Mr. Hanlon that they want to include in the developers agreement with the Board of Selectmen. And I have to agree with you that the appropriate juncture in time is when either the special permit is triggered under which to do this, or indeed if there's modifications to the subdivision, again, both requiring public hearings.
Right.
But therein too, ladies and gentlemen, is also why I think that you need to seriously consider where you want the control point at with this. Is it something that needs to come from a local initiative here, or is it something that you want the state to be able to deal with? So I think we hear you, but each has a point in time where those things begin to happen. So thank you, Andrew, for bringing that up. Was there anyone else in the audience who wanted to comment? Please. Hi. No, you're up. Guy in the... Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Tucker Holland. I'm on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's really just more clarification. I heard a binding letter agreement, a development agreement. I think I heard a proverbial barrel. Are these all one and the same things as far as the different aspects which were described that would need to be worked out and committed to? Affordability, phasing, the ratio, the pacing, the parity of the apartments and units. I'm just trying to understand if the binding letter agreement is intended to be the development agreement. And I think I heard something about this would be worked out before a town meeting.
Andrew or Mr. Arminetti, do you want to respond? Thank you, Mr. Arminetti.
Thanks. And it's a good question. Maybe I didn't articulate that as well as I could have. The way I foresee this is we are under a little bit of a time constraint, and as town council could probably explain better than I, a development agreement is fairly more entailed and more detailed and probably has more legalese in it than we could reasonably get done between now and November 9th. So the letter agreement would essentially be a very detailed outline saying, here's the 20 things we're agreeing to do, and if we don't do that, we can't go past go, and that will be further documented in a more comprehensive development agreement that will essentially supersede the letter agreement. So the letter agreement will be kind of the binding path that will still have the same legal effect, but it'll be more of an outline, and then the development agreement will take over and be the next step. So either one are binding, and I'm sure the town council can reassure the community that that's a proper path to take.
And I see. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the FinCom as well. George Pucci from Town Council's office. That is true. It would be sort of like when you have an offer to purchase and then a full-blown purchase and sale agreement. That offer to purchase is binding. It's basically sets out the basic terms that would then get incorporated into the formal purchase and sale agreement. This isn't that agreement, but it would be analogous to that type of thing. That agreement to reach the agreement would be binding, and it would set out the basic terms that would then go into that developer's agreement later on.
Yeah, so are you committing to have that available before special town meeting?
Yeah, that could be done, for sure. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So it will be available so that our committee and anybody else would have an opportunity to see it?
Yes, that would be fine. Yep, that could be done.
If I could,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, I'll go on the record and go so far as to say if that's not signed by the time town meeting happens, we wouldn't expect the article to be acted on.
Okay. There you have it. Yeah. Steve.
Mr. Pucci, sorry, I tried to catch you while you're still at the mic. If the terms of this agreement are not followed through by the developer, how does that relate to the zoning changes which will be made in Article 1?
Well, it would pertain to this developer.
Mm-hmm.
So with respect to that property that they're entering into this agreement for, then they couldn't apply for something else. So no matter what form that they apply for it, they're not going to be in compliance with that developer's agreement. So that's how it's affected.
So they couldn't apply for any use of this land?
Correct. It would be in violation of that developer's agreement.
Thank you.
Mr. Barada.
Thomas Barrett at Toshman Lane. You mentioned earlier that if we do change the zoning and it doesn't work out the way we want it to, we can change the zoning back. Question I have is, are they grandfathered for the 5 years of the zoning that we changed it to before it could be pulled back according to Mass state law?
Andrew?
The zoning, the freeze provisions are something that would be worked into the development agreement, and there's two types of freezes. There's a use freeze, and there's a basically a freeze coming out of a pre-plan and an A&R subdivision. So it all depends on what level we are at with them. We would need to basically address the issue of freeze provisions in the final development agreement.
But that would be in the agreement, but as far as changing it to R5 or CN and we turn around and change it the following year, do they still have 4 years on that original change?
The point is that they would be, we would basically require them to be prohibited from taking advantage of those freezes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Glidden, I'll give you a second shot here. Briefly, though, sir.
If I could just get clarification as to who exactly would be signing the development agreement, that would be the selectman. All right, thanks. Just want to...
Anyone else? I'm not seeing any more hands raised at this point. Pardon? Okay, so I want to just check in with my board first to see what they really want to do at this point. I'm trusting you're going to continue on this till tomorrow. Is that the
Chairman, you're still going to take comment for Article 1, right?
Oh, absolutely. We haven't even gotten there yet. No, I'm trying to bring some type of sense of where we're going with Article 2 because, unfortunately, we're limited to Wednesday afternoon. The clock is ticking.
We figured to wrap up with the zoning, then we'll go to 3 and all the rest of our financial articles afterwards.
All right, fine.
Yeah, but the question for us is, what are we going to do on 2?
Were you going to, leave it open till tomorrow? Or?
Well, we can't make any motions until after we come out of the public hearing, right? So we can't make Wednesday.
Okay,
Yeah,
because
he's caucusing with his board about what they want to do. They're going to continue this on 2 until Wednesday or not. And so the question is, we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow.
that's all. I just wanted to be a little clear at this point because I'm going to check in with my board, considering that there's no more public testimony, and see what their thought
So do you want
process
to close
is.
the public hearing?
I'm going
Mr. Chairman.
Ed, here you go, because you guys will be able to act independently of, because you can continue the public hearing and continue that for your own purposes tomorrow. But I do want to check in with my board and see where they're at. I'm just, yeah?
Have you already posted your meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you can't. I was.
That's-
I apologize.
That's okay. That's why I was kind of,
FinCom is set, because they're posted.
right, okay.
You guys are not.
Okay, because that was a little misleading a few minutes ago, and that was kind of flying contrary to what I thought. Thank you.
The HCC's already been through this. We have to post Thursday, even if we're not going there, because
Right.
you cannot continue to whatever.
Right,
It has to be posted.
essentially, our,
I know we were talking about, I had heard that they had
So we
posted.
have no choice.
okay, that's okay, good.
We're not posted for Wednesday.
I'm really glad, thank you for clarifying that, I understand. That's okay. So, members of the planning board, I'm just going to call on you at this point. You've heard your public testimony at the moment. We do not have the ability to schedule anything further. Pleasure of the board at this point. Yeah. I mean, that would be my suggestion to you.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on Article 2.
Okay, and do I hear a second? Motion's made and second. Discussion on the article. Discussion on closing the public hearing, I'm sorry. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Pleasure of the board at this point. Yeah, Andrew, I think you've got recommended language in here that we should be, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if there was a suggestion made about amending the article to include buffering, basically, for the workforce homeownership housing. That, Mr. Hanlon had presented from the neighborhood a proposal to incorporate a similar buffer provision.
I'd like to put that in for the rental units also.
It's already in for the rental.
It's on the homeowners.
So the proposal would be to add that to the homeowners.
I knew it was here somewhere. Okay. I don't think it's appropriate at this point to add the no access to the other roads. I think that's something we'd have to take up during the actual special permit discussion. Tommy, it's very hard to put that you can't access those roads in a warrant article. That can't access your roads is where it goes in the special permit after the public hearing, after the formal application is made to the planning board. We can't put provisions that would be most appropriately put in a special permit in a warrant article. That's really tough to do because there may be an occasion on the other two sites that it would work. So we're not just talking about an application for this one site right now. We're talking about a zoning article that affects a couple of different sites. So is that correct, Andrew? I'd have trouble putting that in here as opposed to the 20-foot buffer, I think is fine.
I think the problem with that proposal is it's mixing and matching subdivision control law with zoning law. And again, for an existing road that is a private road subject to a prior planning board approval, if the abutter has rights in that road, now I don't think that it's appropriate to put that in. That's something that I think the board, through its modification to the subdivision, would be able to assess that. One of the key questions would be, are the lots and are the roads part of the subdivision anymore? Are they released from it, which would also involve the homeowners association in that particular development. And also, I think it's somewhat related to the emergency access and other provisions that the board has to consider in the subdivision, in the new subdivision as well.
Correct.
So I think it's a little complicated to include as it was submitted.
Yep.
So the only thing that we'd add would be the 20-foot buffer.
Okay. Board members, are you good with that? Okay.
Then I would make a motion to draft a favorable recommendation with that change, Andrew? Is that it?
All right, so the motion is made and seconded, and that includes the newly adopted language that's in there as well, too, correct? All right. Andrew, is that sufficient?
Yes.
Beautiful. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you. On to Article 1. Great. All right, so, Andrew, I'm going to let you kick this off in Article 1, if you would.
Mr. Chairman, this article is a map change provision, and the map I just saw up there. There it is. Yep. So the area at the end of the two cul-de-sacs, the end of Daffodil Lane, the end of Mayflower Circle would change from R20 to R5, and the parcels outlined in purple, there's 4 of them, would change from LUG2 to R5, and the property outlined would change from, in purple, LUG2 to CN.
Where's this one?
The property outlined in purple is adjacent to the pit. The area outlined in purple are 4 lots that front on Evergreen, and the properties outlined in red are part of the Cedar Crest 3 subdivision on the end of the cul-de-sacs.
Good. Board members, any discussion on this? You're going to have to speak up a little bit. So,
The bottom one's fuchsia. The bottom one is fuchsia.
True.
And maybe next time we'll do green, but the bottom one is different than the top one.
I see it now. I see it.
It's fuchsia.
It's too late for me. I got it.
All right.
On the little map.
Did you have anything from the board?
Any comments from?
No. No. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, public hearing will be open at this point. I think we're both in concurrence with that. Yes, sir.
Right.
All right. So, if anyone would like to comment on this, Mr. Collier.
Thank you, Chairman Rector, Chairman Williams, Cormac Collier for the Nantucket Land Council. First and foremost, I think we were hoping for a little bit more of a transitionary zoning change rather than going from 5,000 square feet directly to 2 acres. We had made that known to the applicant, and we were still hoping that the planning board would potentially consider that. But if I could, through you, Chairman Rector, to ask either the applicant or Andrew, how many total new lots are going to be created by this zoning change?
Mr. Arminetti, I'm going to... Please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, well, if you look at the map, essentially the purple and the red are going to be the single-family R5 areas. Right now, I believe that's a total of 16 lots, 12 half-acre lots in the blue, and 4 lug 2 lots in the gold. So those would turn into, 16 would turn into about 80 at a maximum. The area just above the red outline where you see the R5 and the CN, essentially where the Housing Nantucket campus is, that's cream colored, that was already changed to R5 at the 2014 annual town meeting. So that area has about another 20 or so units that would be possible. That area has already been changed, the underlying zoning. So the gold area, the lug 2, the gold area bounded by the purple and the blue area bounded by the red would go from 16 to a maximum of about 80. The fuchsia, is that what you called it, Erica? The fuchsia area down at the bottom is about a 2.5 acre parcel that's essentially appended to the asphalt plant, sand and gravel pit. All those little gray boxes there are some of Mr. Glowacki's famous collection, some of which still exists. That area is going to probably only have a handful of lots, 3 or 4, but would probably accommodate a half a dozen apartment buildings, but only 3 or 4 lots.
Do you have another question for him?
I'm still not sure what the total new lots is.
Well, if you want to add the 80 single family to the, say, 6 apartment lots, call it 86. So 17 would go to 86, if my University of Connecticut math is correct.
Okay, I had a much higher number, but if that's the case, whatever 25% of the total lots that he is stating, will those be guaranteed affordable?
Well, here we have to distinguish between lots, which are the single-family product, and lots for the apartments. 25% of the apartment lots don't have to be affordable, but 25% of the total apartment units have to be affordable, and they will be. 25% of all of the single-family home ownership lots will be affordable. 3/4 of that increment will be affordable to the 80% median income and below. 25% of those lots will be affordable to the 175% median and below, the way it's proposed in the warrant today. But all 25% will be affordable, and under the calculations we're currently making, 19 of those affordable units would go to the 80% area median income and below, and 7 would go to the 80% up to 175.
Okay.
And just a point, back to Mr. Glidden's question, but it's relevant. The point about units not counting on the SHI, let's remember, all of the Sachem's Pass units that are 100% and 150 don't count, and all of the covenant units don't count on the SHI. So all we're asking the town to consider is peeling out a handful of these lots to go to that slightly higher middle-class segment, even though they won't count on the SHI.
It's a warrant article for another time.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? I can't even remember what I was going to say. So, if I could come back if there's other questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this?
Just one very quick point, Mr. Chairman, seeing that we've talked a bit about buffering tonight, which is very important, especially to our neighbors directly to the east in Cedar Crest. And we spent a lot of time on that in the last process leading up to the last town meeting, and I anticipate we'll spend a lot more on it this time as we approach the special permit process, and we're committed to doing that. But one key point here, we have self-buffered this development, if you will, and I don't know, Erica, if you have a pointer other than the cursor, but in the blue area to the left of Mayflower, there's a half-acre lot at 32 Evergreen that we have purposely peeled out of this proposal. And then on the north side of Daffodil, between the old Miller's Way right-of-way right there, there are 2 half-acre lots that we've pulled out of this proposal, and we've committed to keep the existing R20 zoning. So we've essentially self-buffered a part of the development with 1.5 acres of buffering of lots that would stay the half-acre. So that's kind of a start, if you will, of our buffering. Come on, Tom, it counts. It counts.
All right, please address your comments through the chair. Thank you.
I have to say, I understand what's going on down at the pit. I understand what's going on in the blue. I tend to agree with something Carmack said, and we've sort of not done this. We've talked about fixing things that didn't do this, is where they do have a gradual change in zoning. I'm having the most trouble personally with the purple. And I don't know what to do about that. There is no buffer zone there. Those are going from 2 acres right close to everybody else with 2 acres. To R5. I'm just wondering if R5 is too much, or they split the difference between the front and the back, and that the ones that are fronting right on Evergreen don't become 5,000 square foot lots. I am having trouble with it because those of us who've been with planning for years, we tend not to go from 5 to 2 acre or 5 to 1 acre. This usually goes 5, 10, 20, 1, 2 is ideally what should happen. So it's been troubling me all along that these, at least right on Evergreen, have gone to 5,000 square foot lots, as opposed to the guys across the street and the guys going down Evergreen. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know if there's a way to fix that or carve out a buffer there, that the pieces on the road stay at least 1 acre or 20,000 and everything behind it goes, so you do have that buffer that you're providing over here with the blue area. But I'm not getting that with the purple area, and those are the guys most affected. So I don't know if that messes up everything. I know that's going to come up. So I'm just throwing it out there.
Why don't we let Mr. Vorse interject here for a minute?
Mr. Chairman, one point is that by adding the 20-foot buffer, there would have to be a buffer along the edge of Evergreen. One idea that we've had at least preliminary discussions with Richmond is to take advantage of the grade perhaps there and have the lots not have direct access per se onto Evergreen but be lower. I don't know if that's completely possible I haven't seen a final grading plan, but it's a concept that we were at least exploring to minimize the impact of houses along Evergreen. So if they were one-story homes or some that are lower down on the grade, that an access could be from the other side and not use that frontage. I think with the imposition of the buffer, there's probably even more of a reason to consider that.
Okay. I'll come back to Mr. Arminetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To that point, I mean, we understand the issue. I guess to your point, Mrs. Williams, maybe the best place to accommodate that is in the special permit process, because what this zoning does is it allows density up to that amount, but it's not mandated. The planning board, your board, could say, that land may be zoned that way, but in the special permit, we want you to create some lots that are larger as a transition and a buffer. And that can be readily accommodated in the special permit.
Or another option is to, where you've left the R20, along that northern part of Evergreen, you carry a straight line right around. So all the lots that are actually fronting on Evergreen are R20 all the way across.
Yeah, I think doing that now would constrain us all in terms of the site planning and the grading and the access to the point where it might hamstring us worse than what we think we're gaining. We certainly are open to continuing this discussion and understanding it from the neighbors and from the board that maybe a little different outcome in planning for that particular 8-acre area would have to occur. But I think the best place for it is once we get some more specific plans and we can roll up our sleeves at the special permit stage.
Well, you hear where I'm headed.
Loud and clear.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering if that might be another paragraph in our development agreement to, hold off on that till. Okay.
Mr. Collier?
Yeah, thank you for the second chance, Mr. Chairman. Just finally, although it was discussed in Article 2, I just wanted to memorialize it for Article 1 to follow up with Mr. Murray said in terms of that in the development agreement, if they get this 5,000 square foot zoning, that 1/4 will have to be within the affordable guidelines. I know everybody's saying it, but I just would like to memorialize it during this Article 1 discussion in the development agreement, however that comes out. Thank you.
Mr. Arminetti, comment?
Other than to say no, we fully are accepting of that on the record, and we don't see any other way to do it other than that, so we're fine with that.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this? Mr. Glidden?
Sorry to be so active, but it helps to get ahead of things. I'm just curious, I guess this kind of relates to 1 and 2, but what would prevent the developer from selling the property after the zoning changes had occurred that were outside the development agreement? Does that make sense? So if the zoning was changed and then the developer decided they wished to sell the land under a new zoning, maybe this is a question of town council, how would the development agreement, could you clarify exactly how that might take place, Mr. Pucci?
Pop up, Mr. Pucci, thank you.
Right. And run with it.
I think it's a good point. We would put it in the developer's agreement.
I would tend to think so, yeah.
That it would be good language to use. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. You're going to...
Well, we need to close ours.
Yeah, I guess we're just going to keep on moving. We can clarify that with council. What's the best way for us to keep our public hearing?
We got to close ours.
Yeah. Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
we're going to have to.
we have to.
I'm just checking with you guys.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on Article 1. Or we have somebody...
Hold on, sorry.
Melanie Sabin again, 21 Evergreen Way.
Hi.
I just wanted to put on the record that I agree with Linda on that I think that it would make people in the neighborhood feel a lot better if that frontage was changed, or if you did put good faith. I know you say you're putting up a lot of good faith by putting this in the town's hands, and we're thankful for that. And but I think that to get the town really behind it, I think that it would be good for you if you're willing to let the planning board and zoning dictate how that's used. I would say you'd cure a lot of questions and talk if you change the zoning or the article for that frontage.
No, not in
That's
this
my.
article. No, we'd have to do it through the planning board process.
Thank you.
All right, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second? Motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Pleasure of the board.
I'll make a favorable recommendation with noting the discussion in the agreement. Andrew, you've got all the notes, right?
Yes.
About the frontage and all this other stuff. And not transferable.
Okay. Motion's made and seconded. Andrew, would that just be a side comment that was
Yes.
put into the okay? Because I'm just I just want to be a little bit clear at this point where it has to appropriately show up.
Right, it's not condition, I mean,
It's not in the warrant article, but
Correct.
it will be
Correct.
noted in the agreement about that frontage on Evergreen.
Right. It just has to be a sidebar comment that'll be put in. Okay. So, motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Clarification, Andrew, is if the agreement amendable on town meeting floor, or is it what it is before we get to town meeting floor?
the agreement is subject to the Board of Selectmen and Richmond.
Correct.
But
If
not town meeting
there
floor.
are suggestions to amend it, they would both need to agree to those.
Can that be done on town meeting floor, though? Or is it beforehand?
It would have to be the subject of an article, and it would have to be within the scope of the article.
Okay. So that we're getting it worked out before we get on town meeting floor, period.
The intent is to get this agreement done as soon as possible so people can review it.
Okay.
So, which means this week. So,
Yeah, I was just going to ask whether the revised language that you all just approved would be available to us tomorrow. Can you turn it around fast enough?
yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sure. All right. Are you guys continuing?
We're going to continue on tonight?
Because we're done essentially.
So we should open our public hearing on the Article 3 through whatever.
We can do that.
You guys are going to continue?
Yeah, I think everybody's going to leave.
So, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, the business of the planning board, unless, Andrew, do you have anything else for us?
One last, does the planning board want any comments on either article?
On their articles?
Yeah.
On either Article 1 or 2,
Oh.
do you want planning board comments of any kind? Do you want to reference the agreement? Do you want to?
I think we need
say
to reference the
anything about that?
agreement. Reference the agreement for both articles.
Yeah.
It's to acknowledge that there is going to be, that the board acknowledges that there is a letter of agreement which addresses the issues about, the commitment to abide by the affordability restrictions that we've discussed here tonight.
All right, so why don't you make a motion on it first?
I'll make a motion to have the Article 1 and 2 accompanied by a planning board comment that references the agreement, letter of agreement, that details everything we've talked about tonight.
Okay, so that motion's made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Is there any other business before this board?
I'll make a motion to have the planning board adjourn at 10:03.
Great. Second.
All in favor?
Thank you all. Thank you, and thank you, gentlemen, very much. We appreciate you being here with us tonight to do this.
Quick, before we lose them.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to remind you, they've got more business to conduct, so I'll just ask you to kind of bring your conversations out into the hall, please.
Zoning bylaw and state regulations.
I guess we can have this just tell everybody we're going to continue public hearing on Articles 3 through 7.
Can we, Eleanor, let's take it outside, please. Thank you. That's okay. No.
We are going to continue with the Finance Committee public hearing of Articles 3 through 7. Are we going to do that tonight?
Yeah. Yell it out.
What'd you say?
We were going to continue with the public hearing for the Finance Committee through Articles 3 through 7 for tonight, or did you want to?
I can explain.
Sure.
Article 3 seeks to appropriate additional funds for the renovation of the Brant Point Boathouse Shellfish Propagation Facility. The bids have come in a manner that exceeds the appropriation that we already have, and the amount that's in the motion, the draft motion, would be the amount that we would need to complete the project, and it's proposed that it would come out of free cash. As you know, free cash has been certified at $5.4 million, and this would not add to the tax rate.
Okay. And then Article 4.
Article 4, as I explained earlier, is sort of a correction of a vote that was made at the 2015 annual town meeting. Again, it is $1 million to be borrowed for design for the construction of a new Our Island Home facility. And the borrowing would come within the tax levy and probably not actually hit the tax rate until fiscal 18. But it would come within the budget.
Okay. And I guess we'll go to Article 5, Fire Station.
Article 5 is the similar situation as Article 3. Although we haven't actually gone out to bid yet for the fire station, the professional cost estimates that have come in are showing that it is very likely to exceed the appropriation of $15 million that was made at the 2015 annual town meeting. I have a couple people here who could address it if need be. Also at our board meeting on Wednesday night, we hope, weather depending, to have our owner's project manager present to explain this in further detail. But if we don't appropriate these funds now, then we're going to be just behind and the cost will continue going up. The proposal is that the $2 million being requested would be funded half through free cash and half through borrowing under the existing debt exclusion, which is allowed by Department of Revenue regulations.
Libby, has there been any attempt to value engineer this project?
We're not at that point yet, I don't think, but we have had some discussion about it.
Who's back here? Who are you? Greg's leaving, so it's not him.
No, procurement officer or fire chief. Have you guys talked about that?
Hi, Heidi Bauer, Chief Procurement Officer. We haven't gotten to the point of actual value engineering other than to go back to the original square footage plans from 2008, realizing that we're looking at the cost per square foot comparable to other fire stations that have recently come out for bid on the mainland. And so we know kind of where we stand based on that.
Would you be willing to make a commitment to go through a formal value engineering on this so that we could, which may include looking at whether you could get by with less square footage?
It's included as part of the contract with the OPM and the designer that we will be value engineering as we go through the project. The first plan is we constantly are doing cost estimating as we're going through. And if we find that we're over, then we go back and we value engineer back to being within budget. And we continually do that. Our basis for comparison is the Situate Fire Station that just opened their bids. They did that exact same process 3 times through the design process. They kept going back down $2 million, and it still the bids came in $2 million over their budget, even after they did that 3 times. So that's the concern.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I guess we'll go into 6, which is a home rule petition. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to speak? I'm sorry.
Chief Rude, we have done some value. We have reduced some of the size. We originally looked at meeting rooms. We try to cut every square foot we could out. We're now back at the 22,000 square feet they designed back in 2006. We certainly will try to pull every dollar we can out of it as we go forward. But right now, square footage-wise, I don't think we can cut any more space out of it. The engine bays will be close to full. We'll have one extra office on the second floor, but we're pulling every single square foot we can out of it. But there probably will be significant cost savings through value engineering as we go forward.
Great, thank you.
Article 6 is a home rule petition that would authorize the land bank to transfer land to the town and the school, really the school as part of the town, for its staging area for the construction of the new schools as well as future playing fields. That's it.
Okay. That's simple. And then 7 is just an error in pay for the town.
7 is the correction of an error in the pay to the town clerk that was made at the 2015 annual town meeting. The wrong amount was simply pasted into the motion, and so this corrects that.
Okay. So should we take the articles one at a time as far as the public hearing for any?
Up to you all. I think you
Okay.
can.
We'll start with 3. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on the Boathouse renovation? Oh, John.
Libby, the boathouse has been around for a while. If my memory serves me properly, we had the 2014 meeting authorized $500,000. I think there was a CPC grant for $350 in the same meeting.
The CPC grant, I believe, was at the 2015 annual town meeting.
What was that?
I believe that was at the 2015 annual town meeting.
I thought it was the 14. That's okay. That's neither here nor there. We don't need to keep that. That's not terribly important anyway to me, to my question. Now, so let's just say we've authorized in one form or another $850,000, and now we're asking for another
1.3.
1.3. What, after just hearing about the fire station going up in a fairly short period of time, what are we talking about here? Is this something that's going to be, when are you planning to do this, number one, and how close are we on the numbers on the 1.3?
We have a bid for this project. Okay. And between the existing appropriation and the number that's in the motion, we will be able to meet that bid with some flexibility if there's a cost issue that we don't know about right now. We're also hoping that the CPC will approve the application that we submitted this year for additional funding for the project. And if whatever amount they do hopefully approve, we would reduce this by later.
How much did you apply for?
850? 875, something like that.
How much?
Either 850 or 875. I just don't have that right.
But if you got zero, this 1.3 would be enough.
Yes.
Okay, so if you get whatever you get from CPC, if you get anything, it would mean that we would need this much less.
Correct. Well, whatever number less that CPC approves, yes.
Because this number is based on you already have a bid, so that it sounds like you'd be starting construction
as soon as we had the funds secured and were able to get the bid finalized, the contract signed, that kind of thing. It's a ready-to-go project. Do you want to supplement that, Heidi?
We have the contract on next week's agenda to be signed, and we are doing the notice to proceed with the Marin construction for the next day, November 5th. So we are ready to go forward. The other fact that we will learn more about in the next week is when they did the bid, we had originally bid it in 2 phases, knowing that we were going to wait to see what happened with CPC and for the next town meeting. And now that we are hopeful that we can get all the money up front, it would be a 1-phase project, and they've already indicated that we would have some cost savings by doing it in 1 phase because they thought it was going to take 2 years. But we are hopeful to be done by next shellfish season.
Good job. All right, would anybody else like to address Article 3? Seeing none, I guess we can move on to Article 4, the design of New Island Home. We're just going to continue on the public hearing for all of them. That's allowed. Does anyone like to comment on Article 4? All right. John, go ahead.
Nobody, gives out something.
Absolutely.
Okay. This has been an issue that we've had in the past with other types of things. What we're talking about here is approving $1 million before we know whether the town will approve the total. And so if we approve this $1 million and it is spent, and we go into town meeting, annual town meeting, and a ballot thereafter, and if it's turned down, we'll have spent $1 million for nothing. That's a comment, not a question.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any comments or questions to address Article 4?
Just
Okay,
to clarify, Libby, you said before this appropriation could be used if it doesn't move or if it gets moved to the Sherburne Commons site or wherever it goes.
We need design money if we're going to move forward with a new facility, regardless of its location.
Seeing no other comments, we'll move to Article 5, the fire station. Is anybody in the audience or on the board like to comment or ask questions on Article 5? Seeing none, I guess we'll move to Article 6, a home rule petition for the conveyance of the property at the school. Would any of you like to comment or have any questions on Article 6? Seeing none there, we'll move to 7. The error made in the pay for the town clerk. Would anybody comment on Article 7? All right, seeing none, I guess we could close the public hearings for Articles 3 through 7.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Okay, a motion, a second?
Second.
What's this?
Close the public hearing.
Those in favor of closing the public hearing say aye.
Aye.
Those against, say nay. Unanimous. We have closed the public hearing for the Finance Committee meeting of October 26, 2015. Do we want to entertain discussion on the articles for tonight for motions, or do we want to continue on to tomorrow night?
At my age, I'd rather go to bed and
Okay.
enjoy another day, but I'm willing to stay here if everybody else wants to stay.
I'd like to see us do it tomorrow.
Yeah, so
Are we going to have a quorum?
I'm here.
Okay, Steve, you're here? Yep, I'll be here. You're here.
I'm here.
1, 2, 3. Matt, you're?
Not sure.
Yeah,
Well, if the five of us are here, then we have a quorum. That would be the only.
Okay.
Yes, you should specify.
Okay.
Specify that to the time, but even though you're supposed to.
All right.
It was pretty clear you continued, you closed on 3 to 7.
Okay.
It was clear you're continuing your deliberations.
So do we adjourn the meeting, we just keep the meeting going for till
No,
tomorrow?
just close. So Article 1 and 2, you just want to specify that you're continuing, keeping the public hearing open, you're continuing the public hearing to whenever you're supposed to.
Or we can close it.
Or you can close it.
And just have our discussion on 1 and 2 tomorrow like we're doing on.
Right, because we already had the public hearing for 1 and 2, pretty much vented, so we feel we could probably close it and just do the discussion for tomorrow. All right, we'll close the public hearing on Articles 1 and 2 also. Those in favor, say aye. Those nay. Ayes have it. Okay, so we adjourn our meeting until tomorrow, in which we'll discuss the, I guess, all recommendations 1 through 7.
Andrew, are you going to be around tomorrow to come? Great. Or at least for 1 through 1 and 2.
Good. What time tomorrow?
4, I think.
4 o'clock at the middle school cafeteria.
At the middle school cafeteria, not here.
So we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Oh, all right. Perfect.
Thank you.